The chamber was enormous, large enough to hold representatives from 847 different species. Captain Hyun-woo Kim stood at the observation deck, watching the scene below through reinforced glass. His uniform was crisp, his hands clasped behind his back. But inside his chest, his heart hammered against his ribs. Today would decide everything. Ambassador Ji-won Park sat in the center of the chamber floor, alone in a circular platform designed for those seeking judgment. Around her, rising in massive tiers like an ancient amphitheater, sat the representatives of nearly every intelligent species in the known galaxy. Some had scales, others had fur, some breathed oxygen, others required methane tanks. Some towered 3 meters tall, others were barely the size of a human child. But they all had one thing in common today. They were here to vote on Earth. 50 years had passed since first contact. 50 years since humanity discovered they were not alone in the universe. 50 years of trying to prove themselves worthy of joining the galactic community. Earth had followed every rule, completed every requirement, hosted every inspection. They had opened their borders, shared their resources, and learned dozens of alien languages. And now, finally, Speaker Vrothik rose from his elevated throne at the center of the chamber. He was a towering reptilian creature, with scales that shimmered like oil on water. His voice echoed through the vast space, translated instantly into hundreds of languages by the neural implants every representative wore. The Galactic Council recognizes the petition of the species known as humans, from the planet they call Earth. They seek full membership and all rights and responsibilities that come with such status. The evaluation period has concluded. The evidence has been reviewed. Now, we vote. Ji-won remained perfectly still. She had prepared for this moment for 5 years. She knew the politics, knew which species supported Earth and which did not. The math was tight, but she believed they had the votes. They had to have the votes. The voting will proceed in order of council seniority, Vrothik announced. The Thek Collective, you may cast your vote. A crystalline being pulsed with red light. Against. Ji-won's stomach tightened, but she kept her face neutral. The Thek had always been against them. This was expected. The Forlian Empire. Your vote. Great Empire. Great Empire. Your vote. Against. The Cirrus Republic. Against. One by one, the votes came. Against. 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 Ji-won felt the blood draining from her face. This was wrong. The projections had shown support. They had allies. They had made promises, formed bonds, shared technology. Where were their supporters? Hyun-woo watched from above, his hands now gripping the railing. He watched the voting display update with each declaration. The red marks multiplied across the screen like a spreading infection. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw his communications officer, a young woman named Bo-ra, wiping tears from her cheeks. Other crew members stood frozen, faces pale with shock. The voting continued for over an hour. 846 species casting their judgment on humanity. When it finally ended, the result displayed on every screen in the chamber, broadcast to every world in council space. Against, 846. In favor, 0. Abstaining, 1. Total silence filled the massive chamber. Even the aliens seemed shocked by the unanimity of it. Ji-won sat motionless, staring at the numbers. Not a single vote in their favor. Not one. Vrothik stood again, and if a reptilian face could show satisfaction, his did. The Council has spoken with unprecedented unity. The petition of Earth is denied. He paused, letting the words sink in. Furthermore, the Council has decided on additional measures. The species known as humans has demonstrated aggressive tendencies, warlike history, and dangerous unpredictability. For the safety of the galactic community, Earth is hereby quarantined to its home solar system for a period of 500 years. Ji-won stood slowly. You cannot be serious. We have followed every law, every guideline. We have done nothing to warrant quarantine. The vote is final, Ambassador. Your species will remain confined to your solar system. All trade agreements are terminated immediately. All technology sharing programs are cancelled. Any human vessels or stations currently outside your solar system are now considered property of the Galactic Council and will be seized. You have 30 days to evacuate your people back to Earth. This is theft, Ji-won said quietly, her voice somehow carrying through the chamber despite her soft tone. You invited us to join you. You encouraged us to build stations, to establish trade routes. And now you simply take everything? The Council's decision is final. Vrothik gestured to the guards. You will leave this station within the hour. Your ship has been refueled as a courtesy. Do not return. Part 18-7. Vrothik 7. Vrothik 7-7. Vrothik's people. Vrothik 7. Vrothik 7-7. Aboard the Horizon's Promise, Hyunwoo gathered his senior staff. They sat around the briefing table, faces drawn and shocked. The ship's doctor, Sung-Min Lee, kept shaking his head in disbelief. I don't understand. We had support. The Keswick promised to vote for us. The Draven Alliance gave their word. Words mean nothing here, Hyunwoo said bitterly. We've been played. All of it, the entire 50 years, was just them studying us. They never intended to let us join. The door opened and Ji-won entered, her diplomatic robes still perfect despite everything. But her eyes looked older somehow. Hardened. She sat down heavily. We leave in 30 minutes. The Council has made their position clear. What do we tell Earth? Bora asked, her voice small. What do we tell the people who've been celebrating? Who thought today would change everything? Ji-won looked at each of them in turn. We tell them the truth. We tell them the galaxy voted against us. All of them. They judged us unworthy, dangerous, a threat. They have quarantined us to our own solar system and stolen everything we built outside it. And then what? Hyunwoo asked. Do we just accept this? Ji-won stood, walking to the viewport. Outside, the massive council station gleamed with the lights of 1,000 species, a civilization spanning half the galaxy. For a moment, she just stared at it. Then she turned back to her crew. No, she said simply. We remember. We remember every species that voted against us. We remember this humiliation. And we make sure that 500 years from now, when we're supposed to petition again, we won't need their permission for anything. She paused. But more than that, we make sure this never happens to another species. Somehow, someday, we change this. The Horizon's Promise undocked from the council station 20 minutes later. As it turned toward home, toward the distant yellow star that was their sun, Hyunwoo stood on the bridge watching the station shrink in the distance. Beside him, Ji-won stood equally silent. They made a mistake today, Hyunwoo said quietly. Yes, Ji-won agreed. They showed us exactly who they are. And they gave us 500 years to prepare. They think that's a punishment. She smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. They just gave us time. That's their first error. What's their second? Hyunwoo asked. Ji-won turned from the viewport. They used a vote, a democratic process, to exclude us. They think democracy is a weapon they can aim at enemies. They're about to learn that democracy is the most dangerous weapon in the universe, and we humans invented it long before we met them. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving the council behind. But Ji-won's final words to Vrothik echoed in the empty chamber where she'd spoken them, recorded for posterity. You have made your choice. We will remember it. 500 years suddenly seemed like a very short time. The news hit Earth like a physical blow. Celebrations that had been planned for weeks were cancelled. Stock markets crashed. Riots broke out in 3 major cities, People who had invested everything in off-world trade lost fortunes overnight. The promised age of galactic prosperity died before it could begin. Director Haewon Choi watched the chaos from her office in the United Space Command headquarters. She had been appointed to this position only 6 months ago, chosen because of her reputation as someone who could make hard decisions. Now she faced the hardest decision humanity had ever confronted. How do you lead a species that has just been rejected by the entire galaxy? She called an emergency meeting of Earth's leaders. Presidents, prime ministers, and generals filled the secure conference room. Some argued for immediate military action. Others suggested trying to appeal the Council's decision. A few recommended accepting the quarantine and focusing on life within the solar system. Haewon listened to them all. Then she stood and spoke, her voice cutting through the arguments. We have 2 choices. We can collapse into chaos and prove the Council right about us, or we can do what humans have always done best. We can survive. How? Someone asked. They took our stations, our trade routes, everything we built out there. We're alone. No, Haewon said firmly. We're not alone. We have each other. We have this solar system. We have 8 planets, dozens of moons, and billions of asteroids full of resources. We have 4 billion people, and the collective knowledge of human history. That's not nothing. Over the next 6 months, Haewon worked tirelessly to unify Earth's governments under a single purpose. It wasn't easy. Nations that had been enemies for centuries had to learn to cooperate. But slowly, remarkably, it happened. The threat of permanent isolation created something that peace never could have. True unity. She promoted Hyun-woo to admiral and put him in charge of the Solar Defense Initiative. His mission was simple, but enormous. Make the solar system impregnable. If the galaxy wanted humanity locked in their cage, then that cage would become a fortress. Hyun-woo threw himself into the work. He oversaw the construction of the Bastion Line, a network of defensive platforms positioned at strategic points throughout the solar system. Weapons, platforms, sensor arrays, and rapid response stations formed a shell around humanity's home. It took 3 years and required mining half of Mars's moon Phobos for raw materials. But when it was finished, nothing could enter the solar system without humanity knowing about it. Meanwhile, engineer Jae Sung Kang led a different project. Project Forge, they called it. The Council had terminated all technology sharing, but they couldn't take back the alien technology that was already on Earth. Jae Sung's team took apart every piece of Council tech they could find. Scanners, power generators, medical devices, communication systems. They studied how everything worked, then figured out how to build their own versions. It was slow, painstaking work. Alien technology was often based on principles that human science didn't fully understand. But Jae Sung was patient. He hired the best engineers from every nation. They worked in shifts around the clock, making tiny breakthroughs that added up over time. 3 years after the vote, they successfully created the first human-made gravity generator. It was crude compared to Council technology, but it worked. Earth no longer needed to import gravity plating for their space stations. 6 months later, they replicated a Council medical scanner, then a power cell. Piece by piece, humanity was becoming technologically independent. But the most important project was happening far from Earth, in a secret laboratory on Jupiter's moon Europa. Dr. Young-hee Nam led a small team of quantum physicists working on what everyone else said was impossible, faster than light travel. The Council controlled all FTL technology through their jump gates. These massive structures dotted the galaxy, allowing instant travel between systems. But the gates required Council authorization to use. Humanity was locked out. Young-hee's mission was to find another way. For 4 years, she failed. Every experiment hit the same wall. The mathematics suggested FTL was possible, but actually achieving it required exotic matter that Earth couldn't produce. Young-hee grew frustrated, then desperate. She worked 18-hour days, refusing to give up even when her colleagues suggested the project was hopeless. Then, on a cold morning in Europa's underground laboratory, she made a discovery. She wasn't looking at the problem correctly. The Council's gates punched through normal space into something they called hyperspace. But there was another layer beneath that. A quantum foam where normal physics broke down entirely. Young He called it slip space. Instead of forcing a hole through reality like Council gates did, slip space would let a ship slide between the cracks in space-time itself. It would be faster, more efficient, and best of all, completely undetectable by Council sensors. The theory was brilliant. Making it work was another matter. Young He's first test destroyed the probe ship completely. The second test sent the probe somewhere, but it never came back. The third test worked for exactly 3 seconds before the ship exploded. The fourth test killed 2 of her team members when the reactor overloaded. She almost quit. She wrote her resignation letter and scheduled a meeting with HFY to deliver it. But the night before the meeting, unable to sleep, she went back to the lab one more time. She ran through the calculations again, checking every variable. And she found it. A tiny error in the power distribution that was causing the cascade failures. The 5th test launched at dawn. Young He and her remaining team watched as the unmanned probe activated its slip drive and simply vanished. Not an explosion, not a flash of light, just gone. For 10 seconds, they held their breath. Then the probe reappeared exactly where it was supposed to, exactly when it was supposed to. Having traveled 50 million kilometers in an instant, Young He started laughing and crying at the same time. Her team embraced, cheering and whooping. They had done it. Humanity had FTL. She sent an encrypted message to HFY with just 2 words. It works. 2. Back on Earth, HFY received the message in the middle of a council meeting. She read it twice to make sure she understood. Then, she allowed herself a small smile. Something funny? Asked the Russian president, noting her expression. No. HFY said. Just remembering that someone once said humans are at their best when backed into a corner. She stood. I'm implementing Phase 2 of the Exodus Initiative. We're going to need volunteers. While all this happened, the Galactic Council sent periodic observation drones to monitor Earth's quarantine. The drones reported what they saw. Minimal space traffic. Some construction of defensive positions, as expected. Economic activity consistent with a declining civilization. The Council was satisfied. The humans were contained and slowly fading into irrelevance. What the drones didn't see was the massive construction happening in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond the orbit of Neptune. Hidden among billions of comets and ice asteroids, humanity was building something unprecedented. Shipyards, factories, refineries, entire industrial complexes carved into asteroids, completely invisible to the Council's scans. Admiral Hyun-woo oversaw it all. He moved 90% of Earth's industrial capacity out there, leaving just enough activity in the inner solar system to appear normal to Council observers. It was the largest covert operation in human history. By year 5 of the quarantine, Earth's surface looked peaceful and quiet. Trade was down. Space traffic was minimal. The Council's reports noted that humanity seemed to be accepting their fate, but out in the Kuiper Belt, hidden in the darkness, humanity was preparing for something the Council couldn't imagine. They were preparing to leave their cage, not by asking permission, not by waiting 500 years, but by simply walking out when no one was looking. Admiral Hyun-woo stood in the observation deck of the largest hidden shipyard, watching construction crews assemble the first colony ship. It was massive, capable of carrying 10,000 people and everything they needed to start a new world. How long until launch? Asked Director HFY, who had come to inspect the progress personally. 6 months, for the first ship, Hyun-woo replied. We're building 20 simultaneously. Inside of 2 years, we can have 200,000 people living on worlds the Council doesn't even know exist. And if they find us? Hyun-woo's expression hardened. Then we'll be ready for that too. Project Forge has given us weapons. The Bastion line has given us tactics. And, Doctor, Nam's slip drive means we can go anywhere in the galaxy without using their gates. We're not the same species that begged for their approval 5 years ago. Haywon nodded slowly. The Council thinks they've contained us. They think we're locked in our solar system, growing weaker every year. They have no idea what's coming. Should we be doing this? Hyunwoo asked. This is going to violate the quarantine. It could be considered an act of war. They already declared war on us, Haywon said coldly. They just did it with a vote instead of weapons. They stole our property, destroyed our economy, and tried to break our spirit. They made one critical mistake, though. What's that? They left us alive, and they gave us 500 years of motivation. She turned from the viewport. Launch the colony ships as soon as they're ready. It's time humanity reminded the galaxy that you can't cage an entire species. You can only make them angry. The first colony ship launched 7 months later. The Council's observation drones never saw it leave. It simply slipped into slip space and vanished, carrying 10,000 humans toward a new world light years from Earth. It was just the beginning. Captain Sujin Han stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Dawn, staring at the planet below through the main view screen. After 8 months of travel through slip space, they had finally arrived. The planet hung in space like a blue and green jewel, its continents wrapped in swirls of white clouds. Preliminary scans showed breathable atmosphere, abundant water, and no signs of intelligent life. It was perfect. Prepare landing craft, Sujin ordered. We're going home. It felt strange to call this alien world home. But Earth was so far away now that it existed only in memory. This planet, this beautiful untouched world, would be where 10,000 humans would build their future. Sujin had been given the honor of naming it. She chose Saibyok, which meant New Dawn in Korean. It seemed fitting. The landing took 3 days as shuttles ferried colonists and equipment down to the surface. They established their first settlement in a broad valley near the ocean, where the temperature stayed mild year-round. Prefabricated structures went up quickly. Within a week, they had housing, a power generator, and a basic agricultural dome. Sujin sent an encrypted burst transmission back to Earth through the slipspace network. The message was simple. Saibyok established. Colony viable. Recommend. Proceed with expansion. Back in the Kuiper Belt, Admiral Hyunwoo received the message and felt a surge of pride. The first colony was operational. Humanity had broken free of their cage, and the Council had no idea. Over the next 15 years, 200 colony ships launched from hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. Some headed toward resource-rich systems with valuable minerals. Others sought habitable planets, like Saibyok. A few established secret military outposts at strategic locations along the edge of Council space. By year 20 of the quarantine, humanity had 40 thriving colonies scattered across a region of space the Council had barely explored. The colonies stayed hidden. Ships only traveled via slipspace, leaving no traces the Council could detect. Communication happened through encrypted quantum networks. Every colonist understood the importance of secrecy. If the Council discovered them too early, before humanity was strong enough to defend itself, everything would be lost. It was on the 15th colony world, a planet named Hanbit, that humanity made first contact with another species. Not the Council, but something else entirely. Something unexpected. Xenologist Miran O was part of the survey team exploring Hanbit's northern continent when they found the ruins. Ancient structures covered in alien writing, clearly abandoned for centuries. Miran documented everything carefully, taking samples and recording measurements. The architecture was beautiful. All flowing curves and integrated natural elements. Whoever built this had respected the planet they lived on. Then, on their 3rd day at the site, they found the inhabitants. Not the builders, but other aliens who had made the ruins their home. They were small, barely a meter tall, with gray-green skin and large eyes. They appeared frightened when they saw the humans, but didn't run. Instead, their leader stepped forward and spoke in a language Miran's translator couldn't process. Miran slowly raised her hands, showing she was unarmed. She pointed to herself. Miran. Human. She pointed at the alien. Friend? The alien tilted its head, then made a chirping sound. A moment later, Miran's tablet beeped. The alien had transmitted its language database directly to her system. The translator processed it quickly, and the alien's next words came through clearly. We are Krev. We thought we were alone. Over the next weeks, Miran established communication and then friendship with the Krev. Their story was heartbreaking. 200 years ago, the Krev had applied to join the Galactic Council. The Council had voted against them, declaring Krev too primitive and emotional to be trusted in galactic society. Unlike humanity, the Krev had no ability to develop space travel on their own. They were confined to their home system, isolated and forgotten. Then, 50 years ago, their son began dying. The Krev begged the Council for help, for ships to evacuate their people. The Council refused. It would set a bad precedent. They said, species needed to solve their own problems. In desperation, the Krev had reverse-engineered an old Council transport that had crashed on their moon decades earlier. They built crude ships, barely functional, and evacuated as many people as they could. Millions died. The survivors scattered across space, hiding on uninhabited worlds. Always afraid the Council would find them and finish what the dying sun had started. How many of you are left? Miran asked the Krev leader, whose name translated roughly as hopeful for tomorrow. Maybe 1 million across 50 worlds. We hide. We survive. We hope the Council forgets we exist. Miran felt anger burning in her chest. The Council had done this. They had let an entire species nearly go extinct because helping them was inconvenient. And they called themselves civilized. You're not alone anymore, Miran told Hopeful for Tomorrow. Humanity was also rejected by the Council. We also hide from them. But we're not just hiding. We're preparing. She sent a detailed report back to Admiral Hyun-woo. Within a month, a high-level delegation arrived on Hanbit. They met with the Krev leadership and proposed an alliance. Humanity would provide the Krev with slip space technology, advanced ships, and protection. In return, the Krev would share their knowledge of Council space, their experiences, and their support. The Krev agreed immediately. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Within a year, Krev and humans were working side by side on dozens of worlds. The Krev proved to be talented engineers and gifted artists. They taught humans about medicinal plants from their home world. They shared star charts that showed regions of space the Council rarely patrolled. But Hopeful for Tomorrow also gave a warning. The Council does not tolerate independence. When they discovered we had escaped our dying system, they sent warships to hunt us. Many of our evacuation ships were destroyed. The Council will not let you exist freely. Eventually, they will come for you. Jundervai. 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 Let them come, Admiral Hyun-woo said grimly. We'll be ready. He accelerated the military construction program. Hidden shipyards throughout human space began building warships. Not small patrol craft, but genuine battleships equipped with every weapon humanity could devise. Engineers combined human innovation with reverse-engineered Council technology and Krev knowledge to create something entirely new. The ships of what became known as the Ghost Fleet were designed specifically to fight the Council. Their slip drives made them faster than any Council vessel. Their armor incorporated materials that scattered scanner beams, making them nearly invisible until they wanted to be seen. Their weapons combined kinetic, energy, and exotic particle systems that could tear through Council shields. But more than technology, the Ghost Fleet had something the Council's forces lacked: purpose. Every human who crewed those ships remembered the vote. 846 species voting against them. The humiliation, the theft, the isolation. They weren't fighting for conquest or resources. They were fighting for the simple right to exist freely in the universe. By year 20 of the quarantine, the Ghost Fleet consisted of 500 warships, with more under construction. They trained constantly, running simulations and war games. Admiral Hyun-woo knew that eventually, the Council would discover the human colonies. When that happened, the fleet needed to be perfect. The colonies themselves had become proper civilizations. Cybiok had grown to a city of 200,000. Children who had been born there had never seen Earth. They were the first generation of humans who considered an alien world their home. Other colonies specialized in different industries. Hanbit became a center for scientific research, thanks to Krev Partnership. The colony of Bitgwa focused on advanced manufacturing. Hanyul served as a military training center. Together, the colonies formed what President Daun Shin called the United Human Confederacy. She governed from Earth but spent much of her time visiting the colony worlds, ensuring every human felt connected to the greater whole. She was young, only 43, and had been elected on a platform of human independence and strength. The people trusted her to lead them through whatever came next. Meanwhile, back in Council space, Intelligence Officer Thexval was growing concerned. He worked for the Council's security division, monitoring potentially dangerous situations. For years, his job regarding Earth had been simple. Watch the quarantine. Make sure the humans stayed in their cage. But recently, he had noticed oddities. Council survey probes disappearing in regions that should be empty. Unexplained energy signatures on long-range scanners. Star charts showing minor inconsistencies, as if something was affecting their mapping data. Each incident alone meant nothing. Together, they suggested something was happening out there. Beyond Council space, Thexval requested permission to investigate. His superiors denied it. The human quarantine was working perfectly, they insisted. Earth showed all signs of a declining civilization, exactly as predicted. Why waste resources investigating empty space? But Thexval couldn't shake his suspicions. He began conducting unauthorized scans, using his own time and resources to investigate the anomalies. What he found terrified him. Dozens of habitable planets showed signs of recent colonization, energy signatures consistent with advanced civilization, and most concerning, absolutely no presence of any known Council species. If not Council species, then who? The only possibility was humans. But how? They had no FTL capability. They were confined to their solar system. The Council's observation drones confirmed they were still there. Unless the drones were being fooled. Unless the humans had developed FTL on their own. Unless everything the Council believed about the quarantine was wrong. Thexval compiled his findings into a comprehensive report. He marked it highest priority and sent it directly to the Council leadership. His message was clear and urgent. The humans are not in their solar system. We don't know where they are. We don't know how many of them there are. And we don't know what they're planning. But they're out there. And we need to find them before it's too late. The Council received his report on the same day that Admiral Hyun-woo ordered the Ghost Fleet to full readiness status. Neither side knew it yet. But the 20 years of secret preparation were about to end. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity had not been slowly dying in isolation. They had been getting stronger, and angrier, and far more dangerous than the Council ever imagined. The second act of the drama was complete. The third was about to begin, and it would be written in fire. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called without warning. Representatives from 847 species gathered in the Great Chamber. Confusion evident even across the vast differences in their biologies. Something had happened. Something important enough to interrupt the normal council schedule. Speaker Vrathik stood at his central podium, his scales now duller with age. 21 years had passed since the human vote. But he remembered it clearly. The humans had been so easy to dismiss, so simple to contain. They had caused him no trouble since, until now. Honored representatives, Vrothik began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We face an unprecedented situation. Intelligence Officer Thexval has confirmed illegal colonization activity in restricted space. The species responsible is humanity. The same species we quarantined to their solar system 21 years ago. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Thek representative pulsed with agitated colors. Impossible. Humans have no FTL capability. How could they colonize anything? That is precisely the concern, Thexval said, stepping forward to address the council. We believed humans were contained. We were wrong. They have developed their own form of faster-than-light travel, one that doesn't use our gate network. They have established at minimum 40 colonies across space we considered uninhabited. And they have done all of this without our knowledge. How many humans are we talking about? Asked a feathered avian from the Vorlian Empire. Unknown. But preliminary estimates suggest at least 5 million off-world, possibly more. They have built cities, industrial facilities, and what appear to be military installations. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Species shouted over each other, demanding explanations, assigning blame. Vrothik let the chaos continue for a moment, before calling for silence. The Council's authority has been directly challenged, he declared. They have expanded into galactic space without permission. This is an act of rebellion that cannot be tolerated. If we allow one species to ignore our authority, others will follow. The Council's power will mean nothing. What do you propose? Asked the Cirrus representative. I propose we end this problem permanently. Send the full Council fleet to the human colonies. Destroy their illegal settlements. Bring the survivors back to their home system in chains. Make an example that will be remembered for the next 10,000 years. No one defies the Galactic Council. The vote was quick and decisive. 839 species voted in favor of military action. 8 abstained. None voted against. The Council had spoken, just as decisively as they had 21 years earlier. Fleet Commander Vormix was given command of the operation. He was a veteran of a dozen campaigns, a tactical genius from a species bred for warfare. The Council gave him 10,000 warships, the largest fleet assembled in 3 centuries. His orders were simple. Eliminate the human presence beyond their solar system by any means necessary. The fleet assembled at the edge of Council space. A armada so vast it looked like a metal galaxy. Vormix stood on the bridge of his flagship, reviewing tactical data on the human colonies. They appeared defenseless. No orbital platforms, no defensive satellites, minimal military presence. This would be easier than he expected. What Vormix didn't know was that humans had known about the fleet for 3 weeks. Their intelligence network, built with Krev help, had intercepted Council communications. They knew what was coming. They had time to prepare. Ambassador G1 Park requested to address the Council one final time before the fleet launched. Her request was denied. She was a representative of a species in violation of Council law, no longer entitled to speak in the chamber. But G1 had expected this. She didn't need the Council's permission anymore. She broadcast from a human ship positioned just outside Council space. Her message was transmitted on every frequency, to every world in the galactic community. Hundreds of billions of beings across thousands of planets received her words. 21 years ago, I stood before the Galactic Council and watched 846 species vote against Earth. You declared us too dangerous, too aggressive, too unpredictable to join your community. You took everything we had built beyond our home. You tried to break us. Her image on a trillion screens was calm, controlled, but there was steel in her voice. We did not break. We adapted. You left us alone, and we used that time to become stronger. We developed our own technology. We found our own worlds. We built our own future. And yes, we violated your quarantine, because your quarantine was unjust. Now you send 10,000 ships to destroy what we have built. You plan to murder millions of humans, whose only crime is living on planets you never bothered to settle. You call this justice. We call it what it is, genocide. But here is what you don't know. We have been preparing for this moment since the day you rejected us. We knew you would come eventually. We knew you would try to destroy us rather than accept us. And we are ready. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, people debated her words. Some species agreed with the Council's actions. Others felt uneasy about the scale of the response. But it didn't matter. The fleet was already moving. Vormix chose the colony of Hanbit as his first target. Intelligence suggested it was one of the larger human settlements, home to perhaps 100,000 colonists. Destroying it would send a clear message. He brought his entire fleet out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, weapons powered and ready. The planet was there. Beautiful and blue. Exactly where it should be. The human settlement was clearly visible from orbit, its lights twinkling on the night side. But something was wrong. Vormix's scanners showed the settlement, but no people, no life signs at all. The colony had been evacuated. "Admiral, we're detecting ships," his sensor officer reported. Multiple contacts appearing at various points around the system. On the tactical display, red markers began appearing. Ships decloaking from positions hidden by the planet, by asteroids, by the system's outer reaches. Not dozens, not hundreds. The Ghost Fleet had come to fight. 500 contacts confirmed. The sensor officer said, voice tight with stress. All armed. All targeting us. Vormix felt the first flutter of concern. 500 ships against 10,000 should still favor the Council, but these ships were unknown designs. He couldn't predict their capabilities. All ships, battle formation. Prepare to engage. Admiral Hyunwoo sat in the command center of his flagship, watching the Council fleet scramble to respond. He had spent 21 years preparing for this moment. Every simulation, every training exercise, every weapons test had been designed around one goal: defeating the Council fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Kim, he broadcast to the Ghost Fleet. Remember what they took from us. Remember the vote. Remember every species that declared us unworthy. Today we show them what humanity is capable of. For Earth, for the colonies, for every human who was told they didn't belong in the stars. The battle began. The Ghost Fleet struck first, their exotic weapons tearing into Council ships before Vormix's fleet could properly respond. Human ships moved with impossible agility, their slip drives allowing them to appear and disappear across the battlefield. Council shields, designed to stop energy weapons and plasma bolts, proved ineffective against the kinetic exotic hybrid systems humanity had developed. 3 Council ships exploded in the first minute. 20 more in the second. Vormix tried to organize a coherent response. But the humans were everywhere at once. They weren't fighting like any enemy he had faced before. They weren't trying to overwhelm with numbers or superior firepower. They were fighting smart, targeting specific systems, coordinating attacks with computer precision. Target their command ships, Hyunwoo ordered. Cut off their coordination. The Ghost Fleet focused fire on Vormix's flagship and the other command vessels. Heavy kinetic slugs punched through shields designed to disperse energy. Exotic particle beams disrupted power systems. Within 10 minutes, half the Council fleet's command structure was disabled or destroyed. Vormix watched his tactical display with growing horror. They were losing. Against a force 1/20th their size, they were losing. All ships, emergency withdrawal, jumped to rally point Beta, but the human ships had positioned themselves carefully. Every time a Council ship tried to open a hyperspace window, human jammers disrupted the connection. They were trapped, unable to flee, unable to fight effectively. "Sir, we're being hailed," Vormix's communications officer reported. "It's the humans. Put them through." Admiral Hyunwoo's face appeared on the screen. He looked older than his service record suggested. his hair graying at the temples, but his eyes were hard as stone. "Fleet Commander Vormix, I am offering you one chance to surrender. Power down your weapons. Prepare to be boarded. Your crews will not be harmed." "Why would I surrender to you?" Vormix demanded. "We still outnumber you, because in the last 15 minutes, we've disabled or destroyed 1,200 of your ships without losing a single vessel of our own. Because your fleet is scattered and uncoordinated. Because we have weapons you can't defend against. And because if you don't surrender, we will destroy every single ship in your fleet. The Council sent you here to commit genocide. We're trying to avoid one." Vormix looked at his tactical display. Hyunwoo wasn't exaggerating. Council ships were burning or floating dead across the system. The humans had them completely outmatched. His pride wanted to fight on, but his duty was to his crews. "If I surrender, what happens to us? You will be held as prisoners of war. When this is over, you will be returned to your people. We're not the monsters the Council thinks we are. But surrender now. This is your only chance." Vormix took a deep breath. Then he gave the hardest order of his career. "All ships, cease fire. Power down weapons. We surrender." Across the system, Council ships went dark. Human boarding parties transferred to the disabled vessels, taking command without further violence. By the time the suns rose over Hanbit, 3,000 Council ships sat as prizes in human hands. 4,000 more had been destroyed or crippled. The remaining 3,000 had managed to escape, limping back toward Council space with news of the disaster. President Da Unshin appeared on galactic broadcasts again, this time with a different message. She stood on the bridge of Admiral Hyunwoo's flagship, with captured Council ships visible through the windows behind her. "The Galactic Council sent 10,000 ships to destroy us. We disabled or captured 3,000 without killing a single crew member who surrendered. We destroyed 4,000 who refused to stand down. The rest fled. This was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Love. Earth does not seek war. We seek respect. We seek the right to exist freely in this galaxy. We seek justice for ourselves and every other species the Council has rejected or abandoned. Return to your Council. Tell them we are coming. Tell them we want to talk. But tell them also that we are done asking permission. Done begging for scraps. Done accepting injustice. The Council used a vote to lock us away. We're going to use a vote to set everyone free. And this time, we're making sure every voice is heard." The broadcast ended. In the Council chamber on Primus 7, Speaker Vrothik watched it with shaking hands. The humans weren't supposed to win. They were supposed to be eliminated. Instead, they had just humiliated the Council's military in front of the entire galaxy. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Council's absolute authority had been challenged. And they had lost. The Ghost Fleet arrived at Primus 7 3 weeks after the Battle of Hanbit. 500 warships emerged from slipspace and took positions around the Council station. Close enough to be threatening, but not actively hostile. Every species in the galaxy watched through broadcasts and sensor feeds as humanity returned to the place where they had been rejected. Ambassador G1 Park walked the corridors of the Council station for the first time in 21 years. She wore the same diplomatic robes, though they had been carefully preserved rather than worn. Her hair was graying now, her face lined with age and experience. But her back was straight, and her eyes were clear. She was not the same woman who had left this station in humiliation. Behind her walked 47 representatives from other species. Krev, of course, standing proudly alongside the humans who had saved them, but also delegates from species G1 had never heard of before the battle. The Milik, who had been denied Council membership 50 years ago. The Tren, whose homeworld the Council had seized for development purposes. The Quovar, who had been enslaved by a Council member species and abandoned when they rebelled. Every one of them had been wronged by the Council. Every one of them had been told they were inferior, dangerous, or simply inconvenient. And every one of them now stood with Earth. The council chamber was packed when G1 arrived. Every representative was present, summoned by emergency protocols. The gallery sections were filled with observers, journalists, and officials from 1,000 worlds. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone knew this moment would change everything. Speaker Vrothik watched G1 approach with undisguised hatred. She had done the impossible. She had made him afraid. Ambassador Park, you were not invited to address this council. I know, G1 said calmly, her voice amplified throughout the chamber. 21 years ago, you denied my request to speak. Today, I'm not asking permission. She climbed onto the speaker's platform, the same circular stage where she had once sat alone while 846 species voted against her. This time, she stood tall, with her allies surrounding the chamber's lower levels. I want to tell you all a story. G1 began. It's about a species that developed spaceflight and discovered they weren't alone in the universe. They were excited, hopeful. They spent 50 years trying to join the galactic community. They followed every rule, met every requirement. And then, when the vote came, they were rejected, not by a few species, but by all of them. 846 votes against. Not a single voice spoke for them. The chamber was silent. Every being present knew the story, but hearing it told this way, in front of the entire galaxy, was different. That species had choices. They could have collapsed into despair. They could have turned violent and bitter. Instead, they did something you didn't expect. They grew stronger. They built something new. And when you tried to destroy them for daring to exist beyond the cage you built, they defended themselves. They won. Vrothik tried to interrupt. You violated the quarantine. You illegally colonized restricted space. You attacked council forces. We did violate the quarantine, G1 agreed. A quarantine that was unjust from the start. We colonized space that was empty because you never bothered to settle it. And we didn't attack your forces. We defended ourselves when you sent 10,000 ships to commit genocide. There's a difference. She turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. But I'm not here to debate the past. I'm here to talk about the future. The Galactic Council is broken. For 10,000 years, you've operated under the same system. The oldest, most powerful species make all the decisions. Smaller species, younger species, different species are excluded. You vote them out, quarantine them, or simply ignore them. You call it order. I call it tyranny. How dare you, Vrothik hissed. This council has maintained peace for millennia. Peace for whom? Not for the Krev, whose species you left to die. Not for the Milik, who you rejected because their culture didn't match yours. Not for dozens of other species who were told they weren't good enough, smart enough, or civilized enough to have a voice. You maintained peace for yourselves. The powerful few. Everyone else suffered in silence. Admiral Hyun-woo's voice came over the chamber's communication system, broadcast from his flagship. We have evidence. 200 years of council records. Internal communications. Classified documents. We've seen how decisions are really made. How smaller species are exploited. How votes are bought and sold. How the council uses its power to benefit a privileged few while keeping everyone else in line. On every screen in the chamber, documents began appearing. Financial records showing bribes. Communications showing vote manipulation. Orders showing military actions against defenseless species. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Several smaller species representatives began shouting questions at the council leadership. Others sat in stunned silence. The gallery erupted in chaos. Vrothik struggled to maintain order. This is propaganda. Fabricated evidence meant to divide us. It's your own records, G1 said coldly. Taken from council databases. Every document is authenticated and verified. The galaxy can check them independently. You built a system designed to concentrate power and silence dissent. She raised her hand, calling for quiet. Remarkably, the chamber settled. When G1 Park spoke now, people listened. She had earned that through 21 years of patience and one afternoon of military victory. I'm proposing something radical. Dissolve this council. Create something new. A true federation where every species has an equal vote, regardless of their military power or economic influence. One species, one vote. Real democracy. The chamber exploded again. The powerful species shouted their outrage. This would dilute their authority. Smaller species cheered. This would finally give them a voice. The noise was deafening. You would destroy 10,000 years of stability, Vrothik said when he could finally be heard. Replace it with chaos. Give power to species too young, too inexperienced to use it wisely. You mean give power to species you can't control, G1 corrected. That's what really frightens you. Not chaos, but equality. The council will never agree to this. Actually, you don't get to decide. Not anymore. G1 pulled out a data pad. According to the council's own laws, any member species can call for a reform vote if they can demonstrate systematic injustice. We have that evidence. You've seen it. Therefore, under Section 47 of the Council Charter, I am formally calling for a full vote on council reform. Not a vote by the council leadership, but a vote by every species represented in this chamber. That law hasn't been invoked in 3,000 years, Vrothik protested. It's archaic, meant for different times, but it's still valid. You wrote it into your charter to make the council look democratic. You never thought anyone would actually use it. Congratulations. Today, your own laws are being used against you. Legal experts in the chamber frantically reviewed their databases. G1 was right. The law existed. It was valid. Any species could invoke it if they could prove systematic injustice. The evidence humanity had presented was more than sufficient. This is a trick, Vrothik said desperately. The humans are trying to subvert our entire civilization. No, said a small voice from the chamber floor. It was hopeful for tomorrow. The Krev representative. He stood on an elevated platform, so he could be seen. The humans are trying to fix a broken system. My species was rejected by this council 200 years ago. We were left to die when our sun failed. The council that claims to represent civilization let millions of Krev perish because helping us was inconvenient. If that's your civilization, then it deserves to be subverted. Other small species representatives began standing, adding their voices. The Milik representative spoke of rejection and exclusion. The Tren representative described how their world was taken. The Quovar told of slavery sanctioned by council inaction. One by one, species that had been silent for generations found their voice. President Da-Un Shin appeared on the main view screen, broadcasting from Earth. The vote is simple. Do we continue with the current council system, where power is concentrated in the hands of a few, or do we create a new federation where every species has equal voice and equal representation? Every species in this chamber gets to vote, not just the council leadership, but all 847 of you. The vote was called immediately, before the council leadership could organize opposition. In accordance with Section 47, every species representative cast their vote independently. No blocks, no alliances, just individual choices. The voting took 4 hours. When it concluded, the results displayed on every screen in the chamber. In favor of reform, 654. Against reform, 193. The council was dissolved. Not by force, not by war, but by vote. The same democratic process that had been used to exclude humanity 21 years ago had just been used to transform the galaxy. Speaker Vrothik stood motionless, staring at the numbers. "You've destroyed everything." "No," G1 said gently. "We've corrected it. There's a difference." Over the next months, the new Galactic Federation was formed. Every species sent representatives to a constitutional convention. They drafted new laws, new structures, new systems of governance based on equality and representation. The process was messy, chaotic, and beautiful. Democracy in action. The powerful species that had controlled the old council fought the changes, but they no longer had absolute authority. Their votes counted the same as everyone else's. Some adapted, others withdrew from galactic affairs entirely, retreating to their own systems in sullen isolation. The Ghost Fleet remained at Primus 7 during the entire transition, a silent reminder that humanity would protect the new system if necessary. But as weeks passed, the fleet gradually withdrew. Other species began building their own defenses. The Krev launched their first modern warships. The Milik established a military academy. Smaller species discovered that with equal representation came equal responsibility. 1 year after the vote, Representative Bo Ra-Jung took her seat in the new Federation Council. She was only 24, chosen specifically because she represented humanity's future rather than its past. When her name was called for the first time, she stood and cast Earth's vote on a trade agreement with 3 other species. It was a small moment. A single vote on a routine matter. But it represented something profound. Humanity finally had a voice in galactic affairs. Not because they had asked permission, not because they had begged, but because they had earned it. Admiral Hyun-woo watched the proceedings from the observation deck, standing next to Ambassador G1. "Was it worth it?" he asked. "All of it. The isolation, the struggle." G1 smiled, looking at the young representative casting humanity's vote. "Ask me that question in 100 years. But right now, yes. The Council tried to cage us with a vote. We freed the galaxy with one. Democracy is dangerous when used as a weapon, but it's unstoppable when used as a tool for justice." On Earth, in a small museum dedicated to First Contact, they preserved a simple display. It showed the voting results from 21 years earlier. 846 votes against Earth. 1 abstention. 0 in favor. Below it, a plaque with a simple inscription: "They voted against us." Their final error was the ballot. Democracy can be used to exclude, but ultimately, it serves the people. All people. Even the ones you try to silence. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. You cannot permanently suppress a species that understands democracy. You cannot cage people who know their rights. You cannot silence voices that refuse to be quiet. The Council tried to use voting as a weapon against Earth. They forgot that votes can cut both ways. 21 years after humanity's humiliation, the Galactic Council was gone. In its place stood a true federation, built on the principles that a young species from a yellow star had refused to abandon: equality, representation, democracy. The ballot that was meant to destroy them had become their greatest tool, and the galaxy would never be the same.